would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in some days it just doesn't pay. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to another discussion, folks. I love how these bits of data are trickling out at almost a perfect synchronicity. Yesterday we were talking about interesting numbers that have changed relating to new construction. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about existing homes. What's going on with the numbers there? It paints a slightly different picture. Going to spend a little time exploring that, see if we can't learn something from it. Of course, as always, the best way to reach out is through the website at therebelbroker.com. From there, you can click the contact button in the menu bar, and you'll be able to send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. If you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, feel free to text the word Rebel Broker, the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker, text the word Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222. And what is the Rebel Underground, you may ask? Well, it's a place for me to share exclusive content with folks who have decided to take it to the next level. It's not something where you get bombarded with things like advertisements and all this other kind of stuff. I don't do that. In fact, I would bet that the folks who join complain they don't hear from me more. I've dropped one exclusive video on the group so far. I have already got another one planned that I'm working with now. Hopefully going to get that done real soon so we can get that sent out to members of the Rebel Underground. And if you'd like to join in, again, you can text the word Rebel Broker, the number 44222, then follow the prompts, and you'll be able to work through the process to join. Or you can go to therebelbroker.com, go to the show notes for just about any show, click on the red button that says Join the Rebel Underground, provide the information, and you're all set to go. All right, so let's jump in and have a chat about existing homes. Now, as I mentioned before, we were having an interesting discussion about new construction, and there was some contradictory stuff there that I thought was kind of interesting and might indicate a pivot point in that segment of the market. But boy, the data that we're getting relating to existing homes is continuing to paint this competitive picture. So let's start off with the days on market. The time on market has now hit a new low in April. Low inventory, according to this from Realtor.org, pushed existing home sales down in April and speeded up the median number of days that a home was on the market. And we're now down to 29. And remember, that's the national average number. So that's pretty nuts. That's the shortest time frame since the National Association of Realtors began tracking the data in 2011. Now, what's interesting is the National Association, my local association has tracked days on market much longer than 2011. So I'm not real sure why they don't have data going back further than that. I know I can usually pull up data going back further than that. The previous record was 32 days, which was last May. So we're definitely exceeding that record. Also interesting. Now and remember, this is all homes, right? So this is grouping them all together. And for you personally, what you're going to want to figure out in your marketplace is, what do these numbers mean for your specific interest level, right? We talked very briefly yesterday about my shifting opinions on condos. Well, let's say you're someone who's a condo convert. You believe in condos 100%. You love them. You love the fact that you never have to worry about painting the outside of the place or dealing with the roof. All you got to do is deal with the inside, which normally means that when you switch tenants or when you with however you live your life, that all you really need to do is worry about painting the inside and replacing the carpet or getting the carpet cleaned or whatever when you're swapping out tenants. And you're willing to pay that premium of an extra $100 to $500 a month in terms of HOA fees for that. Great, fantastic. That works well for you. But maybe you're not. Maybe you're someone who says, you know what, the most I'll do is go down to a townhome, but I prefer single families. Well, you need to understand what these numbers are in those various areas. Now, this refers specifically to everything. It includes single family homes, townhomes, condos, co-ops, the whole 9 yards. The existing homes, the total existing home sales, which are completed transactions, decreased 2.3%. So homes are selling faster, but fewer of them sold. Now, if we compare this to the same period of time a year ago, we are 1.6% higher than a year ago. So we saw a drop month to month, an increase year to year. But because of the demand and supply equation, we are still continuing to see increase in prices. So that tells you that there's a pretty robust dynamic going on in terms of something that tells us the opposite of what we were learning yesterday from the data relating to new home sales. Now, one good thing about this article is it does give a few little snippets into some regional realities. So let's go ahead and look at some of the metros with the fastest sales. Now, the top two are my backyard. The San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, California region is 23 days on the market. San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, California, 25 days. And Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, Colorado, 27 days. So those are the metro areas sort of leading the pack in terms of folks just getting stuff sold really quick. In terms of regional breakdowns, let's see. In the Northeast, existing home sales decreased 2.7% to decrease 2.7%. The big number doesn't make any difference. Sales are now 2.7% below a year ago. Median price $267,700, up 1.6% from a year ago. Now that's the Northeast. So remember, same dynamic, right? We're seeing the same trend in a lot of in just about all the regions where prices are actually up, even though volume of sales is down. In the South, existing home sales dropped 5% we don't need to know the total number, but are 3.6% higher than a year ago. Median price $217,700, up 7.9% from a year ago. And in the West, existing home sales decreased 3.3%, but are still 3.5% above a year ago. Median price $358,600, up 6.8% from the same time a year ago. So all of this still feeds this idea that we're completely out of balance in the supply and demand argument in general. We're seeing some sort of pushback on the new homes market. And again, I think the reason we're seeing that is because so much of that construction has been focused on price points where people don't want to go. Median existing home price for all housing types last month was $244,800. That's 0.6% increased from a year ago. That's actually not bad, right? With some of the crazy increases we've seen in some areas, the fact that that's under 1% is actually pretty good. Short sales took the longest to sell at 88 days. First-time home buyers comprised 34% of sales in April, matching the highest percentage since last September. So we are seeing more first-time buyers, or I think it's more accurate to say we're seeing first-time buyers making up a larger percentage of the number of buyers. But remember, we have fewer buyers because we have fewer closed home sales than we did last month. But again, in many regions, more than a year ago. All cash transactions made up 21% of sales in April, down from 24% a year ago. When you tend to see that happening, you're tending to the impression you should take from that is that the investment opportunities or the estimations on the part of investors in terms of how much upside is there on a property when it's being purchased is dwindling. And let's see, they purchased 15% of homes, up from 13% a year ago. Okay. So we can see that in terms of time on market, things are booming, right? That things are going faster than ever. Well, let's look at the next metric that is good to check on situations like this. The latest news relating to the volume of sales. Home sales slipped 2.3%. Let's see, still 9% lower than a year ago. Total housing inventory at the end of April climbed 7.2% to 1.93 million existing homes available for sale, but still 9% lower than a year ago. So it's all about the same equation we've talked about. And what's interesting is this is all built on that. This everything we're seeing in terms of the growth in prices, in terms of what's going on with times on market, with the amount of days it takes to get sold, with average price. All of this is being fed by this bizarre inventory problem that we have. And the reason why I want to point this out is because the next two stories are scary when you start to wonder if we're not recreating the bad stuff from before. And I realize I go here a lot in terms of making this comparison, but the core of it is, given what we know about what's supporting prices and where prices are today, what are we concerned about, right? We've talked about thinking about this in terms of total debt being held by people out there in the marketplace, which is concerning. Right? We've talked about how people are tending to react in the same way relating to debt that they're burdened with, regardless of what the overall debt structure is, right? Whether it's mortgage or credit cards, those types of things. And bizarrely enough, mortgages are one of the first things that folks stop paying rather than continue paying. And all we need to do is get to the point where folks get kicked into that management mindset of their debt, right? Because that causes a trigger. Now, I think we could also see economically a trigger to other things. But obviously, we know for a fact that the mortgage aspect of that will cause us huge problems, because that's what happened last time. All right. So the stage is getting set a little. We're seeing where things are going. We're seeing that what's really pushing this market where it's going is less about a robust economy or a lot of people making great money or any of these other things. And even the amount of growth in price has been not that big, right? Which speaks to this idea of a lot of this, I think, strictly being fed by this weird inventory scenario where we're not seeing the needs of the demand being met by the amount of inventory that's out there. And we're actually just seeing a continuing decline in the amount of inventory. Now, we also talked the other day about how I think developers, I'm hoping that there's some good thought going on their end, but their idea of wanting to potentially close a lot faster on these deals, I think makes sense, which is another reason that would draw them to building lower priced homes. But I think the other side of this equation, because the bottom line is if you're using a strategy of build expensive and sell expensive and you make money, if that strategy continues to work for you, you do it. So this shift is clearly builders being tempted by this demand at the lower end. And perhaps, and why would they even glance over at the lower end? Well, maybe the upper end isn't performing as they have been hoping. Now, I'm waiting for new numbers to come out on new construction, and particularly as it's bracketed in price ranges. But that's something I've been toying with because I'm also noticing that some of the higher priced new construction around here is taking longer to sell. Okay, so with that sort of put again into what we're thinking about, we've got a stage here where we're seeing what I would almost consider kind of an oddly artificially increased set of prices that's run exclusively by this inventory game. And what's interesting is despite 9% lower in terms of inventory than a year ago, the amount of growth in price hasn't been commensurate with what I would expect if you saw a nearly 10% drop in the number of homes that are out there, right? I kind of would have expected an even bigger growth in prices. So something's causing that stuff to slow. There is some concern, but we are seeing positive numbers, increases in the average prices. And in some areas, crazy increases, but nationally, more mild. Okay. And we've even seen, but in general, if you just want to talk the trend, we've seen a slowdown in the rate of increase, which is, I know, an almost crazy way to look at it. But the amount that prices have been increasing quarter to quarter has slowed down recently. Okay. Now, then, in and mixed with all of this, if we buy into this idea that this is a potentially delicate thing, that this isn't a super robust underpinning to these prices, the next two things I'm about to tell you just might be nightmare fuel. So don't go away. I'll be right back, because when we come back, we're going to talk about two things that are happening that I think make it a very scary scenario for all of us. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We've got a couple of more pieces to the puzzle. If you've been listening, I apologize, because sometimes these little segues I go into rely a lot on you having heard other things we've talked about in past shows, and maybe it would be worth it in an upcoming show to do a broad review of a lot of things we've covered over the last 6 months. But the lay of the land is we're sort of undermining the validity of credit ratings through a lot of the things we've done. We're about to reduce the validity of these things even more on the 1st of July. With the changes in terms of disregarding different types of debt relating to medical debt and other things that are just simply going to start to be ignored, which is ridiculous. Plus the fact that your credit rating is artificially being increased by other things that have changed over the last year relating to how that thing's getting calculated. Now, and all of this stuff comes together to really be scary, because it's the way you can translate all of this into one word is subprime. And we've talked about how these organizations want to broaden their ability to lend to more buyers, and that's a code word for pull more subprime borrowers up into becoming borrowers, because you don't need to do any of those things for folks who are fully qualified, who've proven that they have a financial background to do these kinds of things, right? This is exactly what we did last time that got us into so much trouble, just using slightly different tools, right? Instead of filling the bathtub with a hose, we're filling it with buckets, whatever. The net result is the same. And the concern here is that not only are we now in general burdened with a ridiculous amount of debt that exceeds what we were burdened with before the downturn last time, we are reaching out to subprime borrowers in a way that I think is very dangerous. But now the next two pieces of the puzzle are also scary. Freddie Mac has just reported that the cash out refinance activity is the highest since the bust. And it has adjusted their forecast for cash out refinancing to higher levels. Now, what does that equal, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with taking your equity out of your house, but here's the problem. Once you've paid down your house to a certain amount, that's great. But if you're taking that equity out of all this growth that you've seen in prices, and you're borrowing as much as you can, that leaves you in the most vulnerable position possible. So with all of this activity becoming the biggest amount of activity, people refinancing so they can pull cash out, that's buying more debt. You're creating yourself more indebtedness at about a 4% rate, right? in addition to all this other stuff that we've seen, whether it's car loans, credit cards, those types of things. To give you an idea of the increase, the year started out with a surprise uptick in refinance borrowers who took cash out, increasing to 49% in the first quarter of 2017, which is up from 44% in the fourth quarter of 2016. So we're seeing this ramping up trend of folks pulling money out of their home. The only good news to draw from this is that at least we aren't at the point where we were at the peak, where in 2006, 89% of folks were pulling cash out. So the core takeaway here is people are taking away more indebtedness. They're burdening themselves with more indebtedness that is secured by their home, right? Which means that the amount that if property values did drop, the amount that they need to drop is now less for them to be underwater. Now, granted, probably I'm guessing most of these folks are not borrowing more than 80% of what the current appraised value of the home is. But again, remember, that just means more people hugging that upper limit than were before. So being as at risk as you can. And we all know that a drop of 20% is a possibility. Not because we're guessing, not because we're conspiracy theorists, but because we've seen it. We've witnessed it happen, right? So that's number one, a trend that's being driven by the people themselves, right, out there borrowing. Now, that shows a lot of confidence, I suppose, on one hand, but given the overall indebtedness that we see on the part of the public, it's a little bit concerning that folks are willing to embrace more debt based on that. But here's the other thing, and this one is concerning. Guild Mortgage launches a nationwide 1% down mortgage program that targets millennial buyers. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about 3% loans that are scary, 3.5% loans. We've talked about some 0% down loans, not VA loans, which tend to be no money down, but some others that are in specific Southern banks. We've talked about 2% down loans and how these are inherently scary because you are underwater the minute escrow closes in most areas. Because the cost to sell the home would make you walk away with less money than you owe, right? So at escrow, you'd have to bring a check if you're the seller. You'd have to pay to sell your house. Now, this particular loan is kind of interesting because it's structured weirdly. It's actually a 3% loan, but it's a 2% grant from the lenders, which is a 3% equity position and a loan only being for 97%. And what's interesting is the grant does not need to be repaid according to this. Now, relating to this topic or relating to this loan, Mary Ann McGarry, who's the president and CEO of Guild Mortgage, was quoted as saying, "We were able to create this breakthrough national program because we are a direct lender with many decades of strong investor relationships and first-time homebuyer expertise. We wanted to make home buying more attainable for more people, including millennials who are entering the housing market in increasing numbers." All right, so if that's the case, I probably would have suggested that they go out and partner with someone to build affordable housing, low cost housing, which would have made it a lot better for millennials. But they went down this route, which I think is a little bit creepier, because by making it less expensive, by making it more possible for folks to do things in this way, they just create more buyers, which then feeds higher prices, right? And if you remember, we've talked about these types of loans before. These have been brought up, as I mentioned. There's a few of them. Quicken Loans has one. There are a variety of different programs out there. Other lenders also do 2% grants or 2% lender paid down payments. They're all out there. But another thing that separates this loan apart is its debt to income ratio can be 50%. And that's a little bit concerning, right? Because that's a big subprime component. Now, other folks, Quicken Loans and United Wholesale Mortgage, two companies we've talked about before that offer these 1% loans, require a 45% or a 43% maximum debt income ratio. A couple of other things that set it apart. Non-borrower household income can be used to qualify. So let's say you're partners, but you're not married for whatever reason. The wife, the girlfriend is going to buy the house and is going to be the only one on the loan, who's going to be the only borrower of record, but the male person that she chooses to live with will also be living there. They will count that person's income. They can also count boarder income. In other words, if you're planning to rent a room, that money can be counted towards your income. Now, this is hot off the presses style news that we've got going on here. But what's interesting is Guild Mortgage in the past has actually worked very closely with Fannie and Freddie, which are government-sponsored entities. So what I want to know is, if these loans default, who is on the hook? Do these continue to be privately held mortgages held by Guild Mortgage, or are we the taxpayers on the hook for these under these circumstances? That is some information I'm going to want to see. Now, I did a quick search on this before I started the show to see if there was any information on that. I couldn't find any, but this is a pretty common thing that Guild has done, create things. And let's also remember that, as we mentioned before, the Quicken Solutions, the Quicken Solution, and what was the other company? The United Wholesale Mortgage. Both of those were Freddie Mac scenarios. So that, yes, if something went horribly wrong, we were on the hook for it. My guess is that something similar is happening here. And that, again, is another element that sets the stage for really, really bad stuff to occur. So we seem to be continuing to head down this road of embracing subprime lending. Folks out in the public seem to be at an accelerating rate, pulling cash out of their homes. We're seeing signs that we're going to get more new construction, and that builders are starting to look more towards lower end homes. It's going to be interesting to see how all these things collide. But I'll tell you, normally I would use this moment to try to come up with, where do we go with this? Well, I don't think this increases confidence. I think this actually challenges confidence. I've mentioned before in past shows, given the current marketplace situation, I would be more in a sell scenario than a buy scenario in a lot of these places. I want to take that money out of a property and potentially invest it somewhere else, depending on your marketplace, right? You'd want to analyze your local marketplace and see if you're likely to be in a scenario where these things would go down. But I think caution needs to be really something we're embracing right now. And I hate to say that. Now, of course, knowing your marketplace is the key there's always opportunities out there happening when you're able to spot them. If you're able to call what the market's likely to happen in your area. Now, I tend to be in a very volatile market. You know, this in the Silicon Valley, things go nuts here. Things go nuts up and things go nuts down. There are plenty of areas across the country where the last time we had a big downturn, if you looked at a chart of sales and prices and all these other things, relatively little note there. You might not even be able to note that in 2007, 2008, things took a huge dump. There are communities like that out there. And if you're in one of those, a lot of these things may not be things you need to be profoundly concerned about. And when you find communities where this is the case, I think that it is wise as an investor to potentially be drawn to those types of communities that offer long-standing stability even throughout pretty crazy stuff. All right, folks. I hope that has been valuable information for you. At the very least, it's new information, right? We're sort of getting an interesting survey of the land in terms of what's happening with lending, what's happening with existing homes, what's happening with new homes, really kind of giving us some insights into what the market is being made up of right now and what trends we might see. But obviously going to keep my eye on these so I can keep you informed. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and I'll talk to y'all next time.